Humans weren't alone. We were one species in a world full of humans. If you lived 70,000 years ago, you could have met another human, and it wouldn't be Homo sapiens. They were real. They were intelligent. They had culture. And then Earth went silent. Not because they were weak, but because something erased them. So why are we the only ones left? Welcome back. In this video, we're going to uncover the forgotten truth about our species, the humans who lived beside us, and the mystery of why they're gone. Let's go back, farther than any history book can take us, to a time when being human didn't mean being alone. So get comfortable. Close your eyes.
Imagine standing on a quiet hillside at dusk. The air is cool. The world feels still. You might think you're alone out here, but you're not. Not really. Because deep in your cells, in the twisted ladder of your DNA, there are whispers. Echoes of people who walked this earth long before your ancestors learned to write. People who were human, but not quite like you. 70,000 years ago, if you could stand on that same hillside, you wouldn't be alone in a different way. You'd be one human among many. Not many individuals. Many kinds of humans. Different species. Walking, hunting, thinking, loving. All at the same time. All across the world. This is the truth we've only recently begun to understand. For most of history, we told ourselves a simple story. Humans evolved in Africa. We spread across the globe. We conquered nature. The end. But that story was wrong. Or at least, incomplete. The real story is stranger. And quieter. And in some ways, sadder. Because once upon a time, Earth wasn't home to one human species. It was home to many. At least 6, maybe more. They lived in forests and on plains. They sheltered in caves and built fires under open skies. Some were tall. Some were small. Some had heavy bones and thick skulls. Others were delicate, almost bird-like. And then, one by one, they disappeared. All except us. We are Homo sapiens. The thinking human. The last human. The only human. And for a long time, we didn't even know we'd been part of a bigger family. We didn't know we'd once shared the world. But bones remember. Caves remember. And now, thanks to science, we remember too. In the last few decades, researchers have unearthed something remarkable. Not just fossils, though there are plenty of those, but fragments of DNA. Genetic code pulled from ancient teeth and finger bones. Code that still exists, faintly, inside you and me. It turns out we didn't just live alongside these other humans. We met them. We traded with them. We fought with them. And yes, we loved them. We had children together. Mixed families. Hybrid offspring. And those children carried forward pieces of both worlds. Which means that if you're reading this, if you're listening to this, you are not purely Homo sapiens. You're a mosaic. A living archive. You carry within you the genetic memory of species that no longer walk the earth. That's not a metaphor. It's biology. So the question isn't really whether other humans existed. We know they did. The question is darker and more interesting. Why did they vanish? What happened in those forgotten millennia that left only us behind? Some people hear this story and think of invasion, of war, of one species wiping out the others in a brutal, bloody conquest. And maybe that happened, in places. But the truth is more complicated, more tangled. Because the earth itself was not kind in those days. The climate swung wildly. Ice ages came and went like breathing. Forests turned to grasslands. Rivers dried up. Animals migrated or died. And humans, all kinds of humans, had to adapt or disappear. Survival was never guaranteed. Not for any of us. The other humans, our cousins, were not primitive. They were not failures. Some of them had brains as large as ours, or larger. They made tools. They cared for their sick. They buried their dead with ceremony. They painted on cave walls and carved flutes from bone. They were people. And yet, they're gone. This isn't a horror story. It's not about monsters or villains. It's history. Deep history. The kind that doesn't fit neatly into books or timelines. The kind that asks us to sit with uncertainty. To accept that we may never know exactly what happened in every valley, every winter, every generation. But we can piece together clues. We can visit the places where they lived. We can hold the tools they made. We can read the language written in our own blood. And we can ask the question that haunts every discovery. If they were so much like us, why are we still here, and they are not? Was it luck? Was it something we did better? Or was it simply that the world, in its endless turning, chose us and not them? In the chapters ahead, we'll walk through that world. The one they knew. A world of ice and fire and struggle. A world that wanted humans dead, all humans, and nearly succeeded. We'll meet them, one by one. The stocky hunters of the north. The tiny islanders. The ghosts whose names we've only just learned. And we'll follow the trail of evidence that leads, inevitably, to us. Because understanding where they went means understanding where we came from. And maybe, just maybe, where we're going. But first, we need to go back. Back to a time when the Earth was colder, harsher, and more dangerous than anything we know today. A time when being human, any kind of human, was the hardest job in the world. Picture a winter morning, 100,000 years ago. The sun rises late, if it rises at all. The sky is the color of old ice. And the wind, always the wind, cuts across the land like a blade. This is the world our ancestors knew. All of our ancestors. Every kind of human. It was not the world you see in paintings, where noble hunters stand proud on clifftops. It was not a world of plenty. It was a world that tested every living thing, every single day, and found most of them wanting. The Earth was locked in an ice age. Not one freeze, but a long cycle of freezing and thawing that lasted for hundreds of thousands of years. Glacier crept down from the poles, covering entire continents in ice miles thick. Sea levels dropped. Coastlines stretched far beyond where they are today. And between the ice sheets, the land was tundra, steppe, thin forests clinging to survival. Cold doesn't just make you shiver. It changes everything. It changes what you can eat, what you can hunt, where you can sleep, how far you can travel before your body gives out. Cold means calories. You need more food just to stay warm. But in winter, food is scarce. Animals migrate or hibernate. Plants die back. Rivers freeze. So you move. Always moving. Following the herds. Following the seasons. Carrying everything you own on your back. Imagine walking through snow that reaches your knees. Your feet are wrapped in animal skins, but the cold seeps through anyway. Your stomach is tight with hunger. You haven't eaten in 2 days. The last kill was small, shared among 12 people. It didn't go far. Ahead of you, someone coughs. A wet, rattling sound. They've been coughing for days now. There's no medicine. No cure. You can only hope they're strong enough to recover. If they're not, you'll have to leave them behind. Not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. This was life. Not sometimes. Always. The real enemy wasn't other humans. Not yet. The real enemy was the world itself. Weather. Hunger. Infection. Injury. A broken leg could mean death. A bad winter could wipe out an entire group. One failed hunt, one frozen river you couldn't cross, and your bloodline ended. Human groups were small in those days. 20 people. 30, maybe 50 if resources were good. You knew everyone. You depended on everyone. And if your group got too small, if too many children died or too many hunters were lost, you might never recover. There were no cities to retreat to, no neighbors to trade with, just your people and the land and the thin margin between survival and extinction. At night, you'd gather around a fire. The flames pushed back the darkness, but only just. Beyond the circle of light, the world was vast and indifferent. You could hear things moving out there. Wolves, cave bears, saber-toothed cats, animals that saw humans as food, because we weren't apex predators yet. We were prey that learned to fight back. Someone keeps watch while the others sleep. The fire must not go out. If it does, you might not be able to start it again. Wet wood, cold hands, no sparks. And without fire, the night becomes something else entirely. Something unthinkable. You can see your breath in the firelight. You pull the furs tighter. Somewhere in the darkness, a child whimpers. Hunger, maybe. Or cold. Their mother holds them close, shares her warmth. It's all she can do. This is not a story about heroes. It's a story about endurance. Because here's the thing about evolution. It doesn't care about courage. It doesn't care about kindness or strength or intelligence. Not directly. Evolution cares about one thing only. Did you survive long enough to have children? And did those children survive long enough to have children of their own? That's it. That's the test. You could be the smartest human who ever lived. You could make the finest tools, tell the best stories, heal the sick. But if you died before you had children, or if your children died young, your gifts died with you. Evolution rewards what works. And what worked changed depending on where you were, what the weather was doing, what food was available. There was no single right way to be human. Some groups became stocky and thick-boned, built to conserve heat in the frozen north. Others stayed lean and long-limbed, adapted to warmer climates. Some developed larger brains. Others developed stronger bodies. Each group, each population, was shaped by the particular piece of earth they called home. And the margins were so thin. A group that thrived for 10 generations could vanish in one bad decade. A population of thousands could dwindle to dozens, then disappear entirely, leaving nothing behind but bones in a cave and footprints pressed into stone. You can still see those footprints, in a few rare places. Preserved in volcanic ash or hardened mud. Small feet. Large feet. Walking together. A family, maybe. Crossing a valley 70,000 years ago, heading toward something, or away from something. We'll never know which. But we know they were there. We know they lived. We know they tried. The world tested all of them. All the different kinds of humans. It tested them with ice and hunger and darkness. It tested them with disease and predators and accident. And most of them failed the test. Not because they were weak, but because the test was impossibly hard. Still, some passed. Some endured. And the question we need to ask is not who was strongest. The question is, who adapted? Who changed? Who found a way to turn the world's cruelty into an advantage? Because evolution doesn't reward the good. It rewards the fit. The ones who fit their environment well enough to survive it. And as we'll see, the human family tree was never simple. It was never one species slowly improving, climbing upward toward perfection. It was a wild, branching tangle of experiments. Different solutions to the same terrible problem. How do you stay alive in a world that wants you dead? There's a picture you've probably seen. Maybe in a textbook, maybe on a poster. It shows human evolution as a line of figures, walking from left to right. On the left, an ape, hunched and hairy. On the right, a modern human, upright and hairless. In between, a neat progression. Each figure a little taller, a little straighter, a little more like us. It's a powerful image. It tells a simple story. We were primitive. We improved. We became civilized. But it's wrong. Evolution is not a ladder. It's not a straight line climbing upward toward perfection. It never was. And the story of humanity is not a story of progress from ape to human. It's something far stranger, and far more beautiful. It's a story of branching, of separation, of populations splitting apart and becoming something new. Imagine a tree. Not a Christmas tree, neat and symmetrical. A real tree. Old and gnarled, with branches splitting in every direction. Some branches grow long and thick. Others stay small. Some reach toward the sun. Others twist sideways, finding light where they can. And some branches, many branches, simply stop. They don't reach anywhere. They just end. That's the human family tree. Millions of years ago, our distant ancestors lived in Africa. They were apes, more or less. Walking upright, but still at home in the trees. Over time, they changed. They started walking better. Their brains grew. Their hands became more skilled. And as they spread across Africa, different groups began to diverge. Because here's how new species form. It starts with separation. A river floods and changes course, cutting a valley in two. A mountain range rises over millennia, dividing a forest. A group of individuals wanders too far and can't find their way back. Suddenly, you have two populations where there was once one. And they can't reach each other anymore. At first, they're still the same. They look the same. They act the same. But now they're living in different places. Different climates. Different challenges. Time passes. Generations. Thousands of generations. In one valley, the summers are short and the winters are brutal. The people who survive are the ones who can endure cold, who can store fat efficiently, who can plan ahead and ration food. Slowly, over many lifetimes, the population changes. Thicker bones, broader bodies, bigger noses to warm the frozen air before it reaches the lungs. In the other valley, far away, the climate is different. Warm, wet. Food is plentiful, but disease is everywhere. The people who survive are the ones with strong immune systems, who can resist infection, who can move quickly through dense forest. They stay lean, agile, different. Enough time passes, and these two populations become so different that they can't interbreed anymore. Or they can, but barely. Their children might be weaker, less fertile. And at that point, you don't have one species anymore. You have two. That's how it works. Separation, time, pressure, and eventually, transformation. This happened over and over again in our family tree. Groups split off. They adapted to new environments. They became distinct. Some stayed in Africa. Others wandered into Asia. Some pushed into Europe. A few ended up on islands, isolated and strange. And each group faced different problems. Each group found different solutions. In the north, where ice and darkness ruled, one kind of human developed massive strength. Heavy bones. Muscles built for endurance. They could survive temperatures that would kill us. They hunted mammoth and reindeer across frozen plains. They were built like tanks. On a distant island, where food was scarce and space was limited, another kind of human went the opposite direction. They became small, tiny, even. Adults no taller than a modern 6-year-old child. Small bodies need less food. In a place where every calorie mattered, smallness was an advantage. In caves and forests across Europe and Asia, yet another kind of human thrived. They had brains as large as ours, maybe larger. They made sophisticated tools. They controlled fire. They cared for their injured and mourned their dead. They were us, but not quite. A parallel solution to the same problem. These weren't mistakes. These weren't failed experiments. Each of these humans was perfectly adapted to their world. They were successful. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years. Longer than we've existed as a species. There was no single right way to be human. There were many ways. Many experiments. And for a long time, they all worked. But here's the thing about branches on a tree. Sometimes they exist side by side, never touching. But sometimes, if the tree grows in a certain way, branches that split apart long ago can grow close again. They can brush against each other. They can intertwine. And when that happens with humans, with different species of humans, something remarkable occurs. Because around 70,000 years ago, something changed. One group of humans, our group, Homo Sapiens, started to move. Not just within Africa, but out of it. We began to spread across the world. Into lands we'd never seen. Climates we'd never experienced. And those lands weren't empty. They were already home to other humans. Humans who'd been living there for hundreds of thousands of years. Humans who knew those lands intimately. Who'd adapted to them in ways we hadn't. We were strangers in their world. And we were about to meet. Imagine standing at the edge of a forest. You've traveled for months, following game, following rumors of better hunting grounds. Your people have never been this far from home. Everything is unfamiliar. The plants are different. The stars at night are in strange positions. Even the air smells wrong. And then, through the trees, you see smoke. Another fire. Another camp. You move closer, quietly, and you see them. People. But not your people. They're shorter, broader. Their faces are different. Their voices, when they call to each other, sound different. But they're making tools. They're cooking meat. They're tending children. They're human. Just not the same kind of human as you. What happens next? Do you run? Do you fight? Do you try to communicate? This moment, this meeting between species, happened many times in many places. And each time, it changed the course of history. But before we can understand those meetings, we need to understand the travelers. The ones who left home and ventured into the unknown. The ones who became us. There's a moment, early in the morning, when the world feels like it's holding its breath. The sun hasn't risen yet. The stars are fading. And you stand at the edge of everything you've ever known, looking out into darkness that might hold anything at all. This is the moment our ancestors faced. Not once, but many times. The moment of leaving. Leaving the familiar valleys. Leaving the known hunting grounds. Leaving the places where your grandparents were born and died and were buried. Stepping into the unknown with nothing but what you could carry. Why would anyone do that? Sometimes the answer was simple. Hunger. The herds moved, so you moved. The rains failed, so you searched for water. Your group grew too large for the land to support, so some of you had to leave. But sometimes, maybe, it was something else. Curiosity. Restlessness. The simple human urge to see what lies beyond the next hill. Whatever the reason, they walked. And kept walking. And the world opened up before them. The first great travelers weren't Homo sapiens. They were our older cousins. Homo erectus. The upright human. They left Africa almost 2 million years ago, when the world was warmer, wetter, more forgiving than it would later become. They spread slowly, over thousands of generations. Into the Middle East. Across Asia. Down into what is now Indonesia. They followed coastlines and river valleys. They learned to cross deserts and mountains. They learned to survive in places their ancestors never imagined. And everywhere they went, they changed. They adapted. They became new things. But the journey we need to understand, the one that matters most to this story, came much later. Around 70,000 years ago, when a small population of Homo sapiens, our direct ancestors, began to leave Africa. We don't know exactly why. The climate was unstable. Resources were scarce. Maybe they had no choice. Or maybe they were simply good at moving, good at exploring, and the edge of their territory kept expanding until one day it reached beyond the continent itself. The world they entered was not the world we know. Sea levels were lower then. The ocean had locked up vast amounts of water in ice sheets, and coastlines stretched far beyond where they are today. Land that's now underwater was dry ground. And in some places, entire land bridges existed. Natural highways between continents. One such bridge connected Africa to the Middle East. A narrow corridor of land where the Red Sea now flows. Our ancestors walked across it. Small groups at first. Families. Maybe just a few dozen people. Testing the route. Finding water. Finding food. And then more followed. They moved along coastlines because coastlines were rich. Shellfish. Seabirds. Fish trapped in tidal pools. You could walk for days and never go hungry if you stayed near the sea. The evidence is still there, in some places. Ancient shell middens. Piles of discarded shells, thousands of years old, marking campsites along shores that no longer exist. They carried with them the tools of survival. Stone blades, carefully shaped. Sharper than metal, if you knew how to make them right. A good blade could butcher an animal, scrape a hide, cut rope, shave wood for fire. It was worth its weight in anything. Fire was even more precious. Not the fire itself, but the knowledge of how to make it. How to coax a spark from stone and dry grass. How to keep it alive through rain and wind. Fire meant warmth. It meant cooked food, easier to digest, more calories from every meal. It meant safety from predators. It meant light in the darkness. And shelter. Simple things. Lean-tos made from branches and hides. Windbreaks piled from stones. Caves, when you could find them. Anything to keep the cold and wet at bay. With these tools, these skills, our ancestors spread. East along the coast of Asia. North into Europe. South into India and beyond. Each generation pushing a little farther. Each generation learning something new about the land. And the land taught them harshly. In the north, where winters stretched for months, you learned to store food or starve. You learned to make warm clothing from animal skins, sewn with bone needles and sinew thread. You learned to read the sky, to predict when storms were coming. You learned, or you died. In deserts, you learned to find water, to recognize the plants that held moisture, to move at dawn and dusk, resting in shade during the killing heat of midday. Every mistake was paid for in suffering. In mountains, you learned about altitude, about thin air that left you gasping, about slopes that could turn deadly with one wrong step, about cold that came suddenly when the sun went down. And on islands, reached by raft or boat or sheer desperate luck, you learned about isolation, about making do with whatever the island provided, about becoming smaller, stranger, uniquely adapted to a tiny piece of earth surrounded by ocean. Different groups faced different challenges, and slowly, over thousands of years, they changed in response. Skin color shifted to match the sunlight. Body shapes adapted to heat or cold. Genes that helped you survive in one place might be useless or even harmful in another. But through it all, they were still human. Still capable of thought and language and love. Still burying their dead and telling stories and looking up at the stars. Still moving forward. By 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had spread across Africa, through the Middle East, along the coasts of Asia. Small populations, scattered far apart, each one clinging to survival in their particular corner of the world. And as they moved into new lands, they began to encounter something unexpected. Footprints that weren't theirs. Campsites that had been used before. Tools made in styles they didn't recognize. And sometimes, if they were lucky or unlucky, depending on how you look at it, they encountered the toolmakers themselves. Other humans. But not Homo sapiens. Humans who'd been living in these lands for hundreds of thousands of years. Humans who were perfectly adapted to environments our ancestors were only just learning to navigate. In Europe and Western Asia, there were stocky, powerful people who thrived in the cold. People with massive bones and strength we can barely imagine. They knew these lands in ways we didn't. Every cave, every water source, every migration route of every animal. They were Neanderthals. And they were waiting. Not waiting in ambush. Not waiting with hostility. Just waiting in the sense that they were already there, already home, when strangers appeared at the edges of their world. What happened when our ancestors met them? What was said? What was felt? We don't know. But we know they met. And we know that what happened next changed both species forever. Imagine a winter evening in Europe, 40,000 years ago. Snow falls quietly outside a cave entrance. Inside, a fire burns low. And around that fire sits a family. A woman tends the flames, adding dry wood piece by piece. Her hands are thick and strong, scarred from a lifetime of work. Beside her, an old man sleeps, wrapped in furs. His leg was broken years ago. It healed, but badly. He limps when he walks. Yet he's still here. Still alive. Because someone cared for him when he couldn't care for himself. Two children play near the fire, wrestling gently, laughing in the warmth. Their father sits at the cave mouth, working a piece of flint. His movements are practiced, precise. Each strike of the hammer stone removes exactly the flake he intended. He's making a spear point. Tomorrow, he'll hunt. This family is not Homo sapiens. They're Neanderthals. And for a very long time, we got them completely wrong. You've seen the image. The caveman. Hunched and brutish. Dull-eyed and grunting. A primitive ancestor, barely human, lost to time because they couldn't compete with superior modern humans. But that image is a lie. A comfortable lie that made us feel better about ourselves. About being the only humans left. The truth is more complex. And in many ways, more humbling. Neanderthals weren't our ancestors. They were our cousins. A separate branch of the human family that split from ours more than 500,000 years ago. While our lineage stayed mostly in Africa, they're spread into Europe and Western Asia. And there, in the cold northern lands, they became something remarkable. They were built for Ice Age Europe like we are built for nothing. Short and powerfully muscled, with bones thicker than ours. Barrel-chested, to house lungs that could process frozen air. Their bodies were furnaces, burning calories to stay warm in temperatures that would kill us. An average Neanderthal man would have been shorter than most modern men. But he would have been stronger. Much stronger. His arm bones show muscle attachments that suggest grip strength far beyond anything we possess. He could have crushed your hand in a handshake without meaning to. This strength wasn't for show. It was for survival. Neanderthals hunted animals we would struggle to approach. Woolly mammoths. Woolly rhinoceros. Cave bears large enough to rear up and look a man in the eye. These weren't careful, distant hunts with thrown spears. They were close-up and brutal. You needed strength to drive a spear through thick hide and muscle. You needed endurance to chase wounded animals through snow. You needed courage to stand your ground when a cornered mammoth charged. And they did it. For 300,000 years, they did it. They lived in caves when they could find them, but not because they were simple. Caves were practical. Shelter from wind and snow. Stone walls that held heat from fires. Defensible spaces where children could sleep safely. They weren't primitive for living in caves. They were smart. Inside those caves, they built hearths. Organized spaces for different tasks. Sleeping areas lined with grass and furs. Work areas where they made tools. Some caves show evidence of being used for thousands of years. Generation after generation returning to the same shelters, the same hunting grounds, the same places their grandparents knew. They made tools that were beautiful. Not just functional, but carefully crafted. Symmetrical hand axes that fit the palm perfectly. Scrapers for cleaning hides. Pointed blades for cutting meat and working wood. Some tools show evidence of being resharpened many times, carefully maintained, valued. They made clothing. Proper clothing, not just draped furs. We don't have the clothing itself, it rotted away long ago. But we have the tools they would have needed. Bone needles. Scrapers for preparing leather. And we have their survival in climates where naked skin would freeze in minutes. They had to have been dressed, and dressed well. They controlled fire completely. Not just maintaining fires started by lightning, but creating fire whenever they needed it. Archaeological sites show hearths with different types of wood, carefully selected. Some for heat. Some for light. Some for cooking. They understood fire in ways that take a lifetime to learn. And they cared for each other. We know this from bones. From injuries that should have been fatal but weren't. A Neanderthal man who lived into his 40s with a withered arm, useless since childhood. He could not have hunted. Could not have defended himself. He survived because others provided for him. Fed him. Protected him. Another skeleton shows evidence of severe head trauma, partially healed. The wound would have left him disabled, possibly blind in one eye, certainly weak and vulnerable. Yet he lived years after the injury. Someone tended him. Someone valued him enough to keep him alive when he could no longer contribute. This is not the behavior of simple brutes. This is compassion. This is community. This is humanity. They buried their dead. We found Neanderthal graves with the bodies carefully positioned, sometimes with objects placed alongside them. Flowers, in one famous case, though that evidence is disputed. Tools. Pieces of ochre, a red pigment. We don't know what these burials meant to them. But we know they meant something. They had culture. Different groups of Neanderthals made tools in different styles. Styles that persisted across generations. This suggests teaching, learning, traditions passed from parent to child, knowledge accumulated and preserved. They had language, almost certainly. Their hyoid bone, which anchors the tongue and allows complex speech, is shaped like ours. Their brains were as large as ours, sometimes larger. And you can't coordinate a mammoth hunt without communication. You can't pass down tool-making techniques without instruction. They were people. Fully, completely, undeniably people. And they succeeded. For hundreds of thousands of years, they thrived in lands so harsh that modern humans avoided them for millennia. They survived ice ages that came and went like tides. They adapted and endured and raised children who did the same. So here's the question that should haunt us. If they were so capable, so well adapted, so successful for so long, why aren't they still here? What changed? The answer begins around 60,000 years ago, when Homo Sapiens, our ancestors, began moving into the same territories Neanderthals called home, moving into Europe, into Western Asia, into lands where Neanderthals had lived for 250,000 years. We weren't returning home. We'd never been there before. We were invaders, strangers, poorly adapted to the cold, clumsy in the Ice Age landscape, ignorant of the animals and plants and seasons. And the Neanderthals were already there, watching us arrive. They didn't know what we were. We didn't know what they were. But we were about to find out. And that meeting, that first contact between two species of human, would set in motion events that would end with only one of us surviving. But not in the way you might think. Not with war and conquest and clear victors. The truth is stranger than that. More intimate. More human. Because before the Neanderthals disappeared, we came together. Not as enemies. As something else entirely. There's a valley in the mountains of what is now Israel. Steep limestone cliffs on both sides. A spring that flows year-round. Caves tucked into the rock face, facing south to catch the winter sun. It's a good place. The kind of place humans have always valued. Shelter. Water. Game trails passing through. A place worth returning to, season after season, generation after generation. 45,000 years ago, Neanderthals lived in those caves. We know because they left traces. Stone tools. Hearths. The bones of the animals they ate. Evidence of lives lived carefully, patiently, in rhythm with the land. And then, something changed. New tools appear in the archaeological layers. Different styles. Thinner blades. Different techniques. And eventually, different bones. The bones of Homo sapiens. We don't know what happened in that valley. Whether the Neanderthals left before we arrived, or whether we met face to face. But we know both species were there. Sometimes in the same caves. Sometimes separated by just a few generations. This is the moment. The meeting. Not in one valley, but across the entire landscape of the Middle East and Europe. Two human species, shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of separate evolution, coming into contact. Try to imagine it. You're a Neanderthal hunter, tracking deer through a forest you've known your entire life. Your father hunted here. His father before him. You know every trail, every water source, every place the deer bed down in winter. And then you see footprints. Fresh ones. But wrong somehow. The stride is different. Longer. Narrower. You follow them carefully, quietly. And in a clearing ahead, you see figures. People. But not your people. They're taller. Thinner. Their faces are strange, flatter, with chins that jut forward in a way yours doesn't. They haven't seen you yet. They're working, making camp. Children play nearby. Someone is building a fire. What do you do? Or imagine it from the other side. You're Homo sapiens, newly arrived in this land. Everything is unfamiliar. The plants are different. The animals are different. You're cold in ways you've never been cold before. Your people are struggling. And then you see them. Figures watching from the tree line. Shorter than you. Broader. Moving with a confidence that speaks of deep familiarity with this place. They're human. You can see that. But different. So different. Are they dangerous? Are they territorial? Do they speak? Can you communicate? Your hand moves to your spear. Not to threaten. Just to be ready. And you wait. These meetings happened. We know they did. Because we carry the proof inside us. When scientists first sequenced the Neanderthal genome, extracted from ancient bones, they made a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew. Neanderthal DNA exists in modern humans. In you, if your ancestors came from anywhere outside of Africa. Small percentages, 1 to 2% of your total genome, but undeniably there. Which means our ancestors didn't just meet Neanderthals. We interbred with them. We had children together. Children who survived and had children of their own, carrying genes from both species forward into the future. This wasn't rape and conquest, at least not entirely. Genetic evidence suggests it happened multiple times, in multiple places. sustained contact, relationships, families that blended two kinds of human into something new. So some meetings, at least, must have been peaceful. Cautious maybe, strange and uncertain, but peaceful enough for trust to grow, for curiosity to overcome fear, for connection to form. But that wasn't the whole story. Because after Homo sapiens arrived in Europe and Western Asia, something happened to the Neanderthals. Their population began to decline. Slowly at first, then faster. Archaeological sites that had been occupied for thousands of years were abandoned. The density of Neanderthal remains drops off sharply, and around 40,000 years ago, they disappeared completely. There's no evidence of genocide, no mass graves, no signs of systematic warfare. But there doesn't need to be. Competition doesn't require violence to be deadly. Both species needed the same things. The same prey animals. The same caves for shelter. The same valleys with fresh water. The same seasonal hunting grounds. And there was only so much to go around. When resources are scarce, you don't need to fight for space. You just need to be slightly better at getting food. Slightly better at surviving winters. Slightly better at raising children who survive to adulthood. Over generations, the population that's even marginally more successful will grow. And the other will shrink. Not through war. Through mathematics. Maybe Homo sapiens was better at long-distance travel, able to exploit a wider range of territories. Maybe we were better at living in larger groups, sharing resources across wider networks. Maybe our tools were slightly more efficient, giving us an edge in calories gained per day. Or maybe it was just chance. Random fluctuations in population. A few bad winters hitting Neanderthal groups harder. A few good seasons favoring Homo sapiens. Small differences compounding over thousands of years. We don't know. And the Neanderthals can't tell us. But we know they felt the pressure. Late-stage Neanderthal sites show signs of stress. Smaller group sizes. Fewer children surviving to adulthood. Populations becoming fragmented, isolated in pockets of territory, unable to connect with each other. And we know they adapted, or tried to. Late Neanderthals started making tools in styles similar to Homo sapiens tools. Whether they learned from us or independently invented the same techniques, we can't say. But they changed. They tried. It wasn't enough. The last Neanderthals lived in southern Spain and Gibraltar, clinging to the edges of Europe while Homo sapiens spread across the continent. Small bands. Maybe a few hundred individuals total. Maybe less. And then they were gone. But not completely gone. Because we carry them with us. Neanderthal genes that affect our immune systems. Our skin and hair. Even our susceptibility to certain diseases. They're part of us now. Woven into our biology. A living memory of a meeting that happened so long ago we almost forgot it occurred. The question that haunts this story is simple. Did they die out? Or did they merge with us? Become absorbed into the Homo sapiens population through interbreeding until there was no pure Neanderthal left, just a blended humanity? The answer is probably both. Some Neanderthals died as their populations collapsed. Others joined Homo sapiens groups, had hybrid children, and their DNA survived even as their culture and identity disappeared. It's not a clean story. There are no heroes or villains. Just two populations of humans, trying to survive in a harsh world, and only one of them making it through. But Neanderthals weren't the only other humans we met. They weren't even the strangest. Far to the east, in the mountains and forests of Asia, another human species waited. One we didn't even know existed until a few years ago. One so mysterious we don't have a proper name for them. Just a cave where a finger bone was found. Denisovans. The ghost humans. And they have a story too. High in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, there's a cave. Remote. Difficult to reach. The kind of place you'd only find if you were looking for it, or if you got very lost. It's called Denisova Cave. The walls are dark limestone. The floor is layered with sediment, thousands of years of dust and debris packed down, one season on top of another. A record of time, written in dirt. 4 decades, archaeologists excavated this cave carefully, layer by layer. They found stone tools, animal bones, evidence of fires burned long ago, the usual traces of ancient human occupation. Nothing particularly remarkable. And then, in 2008, they found a finger bone. Small, fragile, belonging to a child who died at least 50,000 years ago. It was a tiny fragment, easy to overlook. But when scientists extracted DNA from it, they discovered something impossible. The bone didn't belong to a Homo Sapiens child. And it didn't belong to a Neanderthal, even though Neanderthals had lived in that cave too. It belonged to someone else entirely. A third kind of human. One we'd never seen before. They called them Denisovans, after the cave. Because we don't know what they called themselves. And here's the strange part. That finger bone, along with a handful of teeth and fragments of skull found later, is nearly all we have. There's no complete skeleton. No skull we can reconstruct. No clear picture of what they looked like. For most of human history, if a species left no bones, no fossils, no remains, we assumed it never existed. But DNA changed everything. DNA is a time machine. A record of the past written in molecules so small we can't see them, but so durable they can survive for tens of thousands of years. That finger bone held a genome, a complete genetic blueprint. And when scientists read it, they found something remarkable. Denisovans were as different from us as Neanderthals were. Maybe more different. They'd split from our lineage hundreds of thousands of years ago and evolved in isolation, becoming something unique. But where? Where did they live? Where did they come from? The cave was just one site. One small point on a map. But DNA has a way of spreading, of leaving traces in unexpected places. And when scientists started looking at the genomes of modern human populations, they found Denisovan DNA. Not in Europeans, not in Africans, but in people from Asia, from Oceania, from the islands of the Pacific, which meant Denisovans had lived across a vast territory, from Siberia in the north to Southeast Asia in the south, across thousands of miles of mountains, forests, river valleys, coastlines. They'd adapted to cold climates in the highlands and warm climates in the lowlands. They were everywhere and nowhere. Ghosts in the genetic record. Imagine their world. Dense forests in the foothills of the Himalayas. Bamboo groves and misty valleys. Rivers cutting through stone. Winters cold enough to freeze your breath. Summers hot and humid. They lived in this landscape for hundreds of thousands of years. They hunted. They made tools. They raised children. They survived ice ages and warm periods and everything in between. But we don't know what they looked like. Not really. The few fragments we have suggest they were robust, heavily built, with large teeth. But that's guesswork. Extrapolation from almost nothing. We don't know what language they spoke, if they had language at all. Though with brains like theirs, they almost certainly did. We don't know what they believed, what they feared, what they loved. We only know they were there. And that at some point, they met us. Because that Denisovan DNA in modern humans didn't appear by magic. It got there the same way Neanderthal DNA did. Through interbreeding. Through relationships that crossed the species barrier. Through children born of two kinds of human. And those children survived. They thrived, even. Some of the Denisovan genes that persist in modern populations are useful. There's a gene variant common in Tibetans that helps them survive at high altitude, where oxygen is thin. That gene came from Denisovans. They lived in the mountains long enough to evolve the ability to breathe comfortably there, and when they mixed with Homo sapiens, they passed that gift along. People in Papua New Guinea carry Denisovan DNA too. 5% of their genome, in some cases. More than any other population on Earth. Which means somewhere in the islands and forests of Southeast Asia, our ancestors encountered Denisovans and lived alongside them long enough for deep genetic mixing to occur. These weren't brief encounters. These were sustained relationships. Communities living near each other. Trading, perhaps. Communicating somehow. And sometimes, forming families. But like the Neanderthals, the Denisovans didn't last. Somewhere between 50,000 and 30,000 years ago, they disappeared. Not all at once. Not in a single event. But gradually, the way populations do when they're outcompeted or absorbed or simply unlucky. The last Denisovans may have lived on islands. Remote places where small populations can persist long after their mainland relatives are gone. Or maybe they lived in mountain valleys, isolated and dwindling, until one winter there simply weren't enough of them left to continue. We'll probably never know exactly when or where the last Denisovan died. There's no grave we can point to. No final resting place. Just an absence in the archaeological record. A species that vanishes from history, leaving only genetic echoes behind. But those echoes matter. They tell us that the world our ancestors entered was more crowded than we imagined. More diverse. Richer with possibility and variation. There wasn't one right way to be human. There were many ways. And Denisovans found one that worked for them, for a very long time. The strangest part of their story is how recently we discovered it. Just 15 years ago, we didn't know Denisovans existed. An entire species of human, lost to time, invisible to history. And then a finger bone in a cave changed everything. It makes you wonder what else we don't know. What other humans lived and died and left no trace we've found yet. What other ghosts are hiding in our DNA, waiting to be discovered. Because if Denisovans could remain hidden for 50,000 years, who else might be out there? What other branches of the human family existed in places we haven't looked, or looked but didn't recognize? The more we search, the more complex the picture becomes. And some of the strangest humans of all weren't found in caves or mountains. They were found on islands. Small islands, where evolution plays tricks. Where the rules of size and shape and survival bend in unexpected ways. And on those islands, humans became something almost unrecognizable. Something that challenges our very definition of what it means to be human at all. There's something strange about islands. Something that changes the rules. On the mainland, evolution works slowly, predictably. Big animals stay big. Small animals stay small. But isolate a population on an island, cut them off from the rest of the world, and evolution starts to experiment. Give it enough time, and the impossible becomes normal. Elephants shrink to the size of ponies. Rodents grow as large as dogs. Birds forget how to fly because there are no predators to escape from. The usual constraints disappear. Size becomes flexible. And life finds new shapes. This happens to humans too. In 2003, researchers were excavating a cave on the island of Flores in Indonesia. A small island, part of a long chain stretching between Asia and Australia. The cave was called Liang Bua. Cool and dark, with high ceilings and a floor thick with sediment. They were digging carefully through the layers when they found bones. Human bones, or something close to human. But wrong in a way that made no sense. The skeleton was tiny. The individual, when alive, would have stood about 3.5 feet tall. the height of a modern 4-year-old child. But this wasn't a child. The bones were fully adult. Fused growth plates. Worn teeth. This was a grown person. Just impossibly small. At first, they thought it must be a deformity. Some rare condition that stunted growth. But then they found more skeletons. And stone tools. And evidence that these small humans had lived on Flores for thousands of years, hunting and surviving and raising families. They called them Homo floresiensis, the human from Flores. Though most people call them something else. Hobbits. The nickname stuck because it's hard to think of them any other way. They were small in every dimension. Short stature. Small skulls. Brains about the size of a chimpanzee's, a third the size of ours. And yet they were human. Undeniably human. They made stone tools. Sophisticated ones. They hunted dwarf elephants, stegodont, that lived on the island alongside them. Elephants that had also shrunk over generations, adapting to the limited resources of island life. And they used fire. Evidence of hearths and burned bones suggests they cooked their food, controlled flames, understood the chemistry of heat and fuel. You don't need a large brain to be intelligent. You need the right kind of brain. And whatever was happening inside those small skulls was enough. Enough to solve problems. Enough to adapt. Enough to survive on an isolated island for tens of thousands of years. Imagine their world. Dense tropical jungle. Volcanic peaks rising through mist. Rivers and waterfalls. Beaches of black sand. And in the forests, animals found nowhere else on Earth. Giant rats. Komodo dragons. Storks as tall as a person. The humans who lived there were part of that strangeness. Shaped by the same forces. Isolation. Limited food. Generations upon generations of pressure to become smaller, to need less, to make the most of scarce resources. This is called island dwarfism. It's a common pattern. When large animals arrive on small islands, their descendants tend to shrink. Because on an island, there's only so much food. A smaller body needs fewer calories. And in a place where food is limited, needing less is an advantage. Homo floresiensis may have descended from Homo erectus, the same species that spread out of Africa nearly 2 million years ago. Erectus was tall, long-limbed, built for walking vast distances across open landscapes. But if a small population of them reached Flores, perhaps by accident, perhaps on rafts or driftwood after a storm, they would have been trapped. The island was far enough from the mainland that leaving was impossible. No way back. No way forward. Just the island and whatever it could provide. And over time, over thousands of generations, they changed. They shrank. Not all at once. But slowly, each generation slightly smaller than the last. Until what emerged was something new. Something that could thrive where their ancestors would have starved. They weren't failures. They were a success story. A perfect adaptation to a specific place. But they didn't last. The most recent evidence of Homo floresiensis dates to around 50,000 years ago. And then, like the others, they disappear from the record. What happened to them? We don't know for certain. Volcanic eruptions? Maybe. Flores is geologically active, and a major eruption could have wiped out a small population. Or maybe Homo sapiens reached the island. We know our ancestors were in the region around that time, island hopping across Southeast Asia on their way to Australia. If we met them, what happened? Did we compete for the same resources? Did we hunt them? Or did they simply fade away, their population too small to sustain itself once their world was disrupted? There are stories, even now, told by people living on Flores. Stories of small, hairy people living in the forests. The Ebu Gogo. The locals say they existed until a few hundred years ago, maybe less. Scientists are skeptical. Stories grow and change over time, and memories are unreliable. But it makes you wonder. Because Flores wasn't the only island with strange humans. In the Philippines, researchers found another species, Homo luzonensis. Also small, though not as small as Floresiensis. Also island adapted. Also extinct. How many islands held their own versions of humanity? How many small populations, cut off and isolated, evolved into something unique? And how many disappeared before we even knew to look for them? Islands are fragile places. Small populations are vulnerable. A single disaster, a single bad decade, and an entire species can vanish. No grand extinction event. No dramatic ending. Just the quiet absence of footprints where footprints used to be. And when they're gone completely. Because island populations rarely leave the island. Their bones stay buried in cave sediments or wash away in tropical rains. Their tools erode. Their fires fade to ash. Most of them we'll never find. Most human species that ever existed are lost to us. Not because they weren't real, but because the evidence didn't survive. Because no one was there to witness their end. Because the world moved on and forgot them. It's humbling, in a way, to realize how much we don't know. How many ways there were to be human, and how few of those ways we've discovered. But every so often, we find something that changes the picture entirely. A cave that shouldn't exist. Bones that don't make sense. Evidence of humans in places and times that force us to rethink everything. In South Africa, deep underground in a cave system almost impossible to reach, researchers made a discovery that defies every rule we thought we knew. Humans that may have lived recently. That may have had symbolic thought. That may have buried their dead with intention and care. But their brains were the size of oranges. And they turned our understanding of what it means to be human completely upside down. Deep beneath the ground in South Africa, there's a cave system called Rising Star. Limestone passages carved by water over millions of years. Tunnels that twist and drop and narrow to spaces barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Most of the cave is accessible, if you're careful. Chambers with high ceilings. Formations of rock that drip and gleam in lamplight. But there's one section that's different. One chamber that's almost impossible to reach. To get there, you have to crawl through a passage called the Dragon's Back. A razor-thin ridge of rock with drops on either side. Then you descend through a vertical shaft. A chute in the stone, barely 7 inches wide in places. You have to exhale completely to fit. Lower yourself down in total darkness, feeling for handholds you can't see. 80 feet down, the chute opens into a chamber. Small. Silent. Untouched for thousands of years. And on the floor of that chamber, scattered in the sediment, are bones. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. The bones of at least 15 individuals. Men, women, children. All the same species. All deposited in this one impossible-to-reach place. In 2013, researchers sent cavers down to investigate. The only people who could fit through the passage were small and slender. They descended with cameras and lights, squeezing through gaps that would trap anyone larger. What they found didn't make sense. The bones belonged to a species no one had seen before. Human-like, but strange. A mix of features that shouldn't exist together. Small brains, about the size of an orange. Primitive shoulders and hips. But hands that looked modern, capable of precise grip. Feet built for walking upright, just like ours. They called them Homo naledi, the human from the Rising Star cave system. Naledi means star in the local language. At first, everyone assumed they were ancient. Millions of years old. Primitive ancestors from the early days of human evolution. That would explain the small brain, the odd proportions. They were from a time before humans became fully modern. But when the bones were dated, the results were shocking. These individuals died around 250,000 years ago. Maybe more recently. They weren't ancient at all. They were contemporary with early Homo sapiens. They lived at the same time as our direct ancestors. Which means that while our lineage was developing larger brains and more sophisticated tools, Homo naledi was still getting by with brains a third the size. And they were surviving. Not struggling. Surviving. But here's the mystery that keeps scientists awake at night. How did all those bones get into that chamber? There are no predator marks on the bones. No signs of being chewed or dragged. And there's no evidence that these individuals lived in the chamber. No tools. No food remains. No hearths or sleeping areas. Just bones. The chamber is deep underground. Dark. Difficult to access. You couldn't fall into it by accident. You couldn't stumble in while exploring. You'd have to know it was there. And you'd have to deliberately climb down, squeezing through passages that would terrify most people. So how did 15 bodies end up there? One possibility is that they crawled in to die. Seeking shelter, perhaps, when they were sick or injured. But that doesn't explain why so many ended up in the same place. Or why there are no other remains elsewhere in the cave system. Another possibility, the one that keeps scientists debating, is that the bodies were placed there deliberately by other Homo naledi. That this chamber was a burial site. If that's true, it changes everything. Because burial of the dead is something we associate with large brains. With complex thought and symbolic behavior. With culture and ritual and an understanding of mortality. We thought you needed a modern-sized brain for that kind of abstract thinking. But if Homo naledi, with their tiny brains, were burying their dead in hidden chambers deep underground, then brain size doesn't determine behavior the way we thought it did. Intelligence isn't just about volume. It's about wiring. About connections. About how the brain organizes itself. And maybe Homo naledi's small brains were organized in ways that let them think symbolically, even without the processing power we have. Or maybe we're wrong about what burial means. Maybe it wasn't ritual. Maybe it was just disposal. Getting rid of bodies to keep living spaces clean. We don't know. We can't ask them. But the image stays with you. Small-brained humans, carrying their dead through darkness. Navigating passages that require courage and planning. Lowering bodies into a chamber no one else would ever see. And then leaving. Climbing back up to the world of light. Why would they do that? What were they thinking? What did death mean to them? We like to think we understand what makes us human. Language. Art. Complex tools. Large brains. Culture. These are the markers we use. The checklist that separates us from animals. But Homo naledi breaks the checklist. They had some of those things, maybe. But not others. They don't fit our categories. They don't behave the way we expect ancient humans to behave. And that's unsettling. Because if they could engage in complex behavior without modern brains, then maybe our definitions are too narrow. Maybe there were many ways to be human. Many kinds of minds. Many paths to thought and feeling and meaning. The Homo naledi bones are still being studied. New discoveries emerge every few years. More chambers. More remains. Each one raising more questions than it answers. And the biggest question remains unanswered. When did they disappear? Are the dates correct? Or could some populations have survived longer? Could they have overlapped with Homo sapiens, not just in time but in space? If we met them, we have no record of it. But the world is large, and the past is poorly preserved. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Homo naledi reminds us how much we still don't understand. How many assumptions we make about intelligence and culture and what it means to be human. They lived in a world we're only beginning to glimpse. They thought thoughts we can't reconstruct. They solved problems in ways we'll never fully comprehend. And then, like all the others, they vanished. But their story isn't just about them. It's about the bigger picture. The vast, branching, complicated family of humans that once existed. All those different experiments in being human, spread across the world. And while some of those experiments were happening in caves and on islands, one group of humans was doing something unprecedented. They were moving, not just across valleys or between hunting grounds, but across entire continents. They were becoming the great travelers. The ones who would reach every corner of the earth. The ones who would outlast all the others. The ones who would become us. Picture a pebble dropped into still water. The ripples move outward slowly, inevitably, spreading across the surface until they reach the edges. That's how Homo Sapiens spread across the world. Not in a rush. Not in a single generation. But steadily, persistently, like water finding its level. 70,000 years ago, we were a small population in Africa. Confined to familiar territories. Comfortable, more or less, in the landscapes that shaped us. And then something shifted. Maybe the climate changed, forcing us to move. Maybe our population grew too large for the available resources. Or maybe it was simply curiosity. The human impulse to see what's beyond the horizon. Whatever the reason, we started walking. And we didn't stop. The first groups to leave Africa moved slowly. A few miles per year, maybe less. Following the coastline around the Red Sea. Crossing into the Arabian Peninsula during a rare wet period when rivers flowed and grasslands bloomed. They didn't know they were migrating. They were just following food. Following water. Moving to the next valley, the next river, the next place that looked promising. But each generation settled a little farther from where their parents were born. And over thousands of years, those small movements added up. Some groups turned east, following the southern coast of Asia. They lived on fish and shellfish, moving from beach to beach, estuary to estuary. The ocean provided. It always provided, if you knew how to read the tides. By 60,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had reached Southeast Asia. By 50,000 years ago, we'd crossed open ocean to reach Australia. Not by accident. Not drifting on debris. But deliberately, building boats or rafts capable of carrying families across miles of open water to islands they could see on the horizon. That required planning, cooperation, the ability to imagine a journey and prepare for it. Not everyone could do that. But we could. Other groups moved north and west, into Europe. Into lands the Neanderthals had called home for 250,000 years. We arrived poorly adapted to the cold, struggling with winters we'd never experienced. But we learned. We watched. Maybe we learned from the Neanderthals themselves. How to hunt reindeer. How to make warm clothing. How to survive when the world froze. Still others moved east across the grasslands of Central Asia. Following mammoth herds across open steppes that stretched to the horizon. Living in a landscape so vast and empty it's hard for us to imagine today. And some groups stayed behind, in Africa, continuing to live in the places our species first emerged. Not everyone left. Not everyone wanted to. But the ones who did leave carried something with them. Something that gave them an advantage, subtle but significant. It wasn't strength. Neanderthals were stronger. It wasn't adaptation to local climates. The other human species had been evolving in their territories for hundreds of thousands of years. We were newcomers everywhere we went. What we had was flexibility. We could learn new skills quickly. We could adapt our behavior to new environments without waiting for our bodies to evolve. When we reached cold climates, We didn't need to evolve thicker bones and broader bodies. We made better clothes. We built better shelters. We changed our culture instead of our biology. And we cooperated in larger groups. This is harder to see in the archaeological record than tools or bones. But the evidence is there. Homo sapiens sites show signs of trade networks stretching hundreds of miles. Materials that came from distant sources. Shells from the coast found far inland. Stone from specific quarries carried across entire regions. That means groups were connected. Sharing resources. Sharing knowledge. Maybe sharing genes, moving between groups through marriage or adoption. A network of communities that could support each other during hard times. If one group suffered a bad winter, they could trade with neighbors who'd had better luck. If a hunting ground failed, they could move to territory held by allies. This kind of flexibility, this social safety net, made survival more reliable. Other human species lived in smaller, more isolated groups. When times were hard, they had only themselves to depend on. And sometimes, that wasn't enough. We also innovated constantly. Homo sapiens sites show a steady progression of new tool types, new techniques. Not everywhere at once. Different groups invented different solutions. But innovations spread. A good idea in one community would appear in neighboring communities a generation later. Knowledge flowed through the network. By 40,000 years ago, we were making sophisticated tools. Bone needles for sewing. Fish hooks. Spear throwers that let us hunt from a safer distance. And we were creating art. Painting on cave walls. Carving figures from ivory. Making music with bone flutes. Were we smarter than other humans? Maybe. Or maybe we just built on each other's ideas more effectively. One person invents something useful. Their children improve it. Their grandchildren share it with other groups. Over generations, the cumulative knowledge grows. And all the while, we kept moving. By 30,000 years ago, Homo sapiens had reached Siberia. By 20,000 years ago, maybe earlier, we'd crossed into the Americas. Walking across a land bridge that connected Asia to Alaska during the Ice Age, when sea levels were lower. From there, we spread south, down through North America, eventually reaching the tip of South America. We were everywhere. Every continent except Antarctica. Every climate from Arctic tundra to tropical rainforest to desert. Adapting to each new environment, learning to exploit resources other species couldn't access. And wherever we went, we encountered a world already inhabited. Not by animals alone, but by other humans. Neanderthals in Europe. Denisovans in Asia. Strange small humans on islands. Populations we haven't even discovered yet. For a brief time, the world was crowded with human diversity. Different species sharing space, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. Meeting. Mixing. Competing. But that diversity was beginning to fade. One by one, the other human species were disappearing. Not suddenly. Not all at once. But gradually, inexorably. Their populations shrinking. Their territories contracting. Until only traces remained. The world was changing. And we were changing it. Not through deliberate conquest. Not through genocide. But through the simple, relentless pressure of expansion. We needed space. We needed resources. And we were very, very good at getting them. By 30,000 years ago, the Neanderthals were gone. By 50,000 years ago, maybe sooner, the Denisovans had vanished. The island humans disappeared. The cave dwellers went silent. And Homo sapiens kept spreading, kept adapting, kept surviving. The Great Expansion wasn't a triumph. It was just a fact. We moved. We multiplied. We filled the empty spaces. And where spaces weren't empty, We filled them anyway. What happened to the others? Where did they go? Why didn't they expand the way we did? These questions don't have simple answers. But the pattern is clear. The world once held many kinds of human. And now, very recently, it holds only one. Those quiet disappearances, those gradual extinctions, are the next part of the story. The part we're still trying to understand. The part that haunts us because it could have gone differently. It almost did. There's a sound you never hear. The sound of the last time something happens. The last footprint pressed into mud that will never harden into stone. The last fire built in a cave that will stand cold forever after. The last voice speaking a language no one else remembers. These moments pass in silence. No fanfare. No witnesses. Just an ending that no one marks because no one knows it's an ending yet. This is how species disappear. Not with catastrophe. Not with drama. But quietly. One small loss at a time until there's nothing left. 40,000 years ago, the world still held many kinds of human. Neanderthals in the valleys of Europe. Denisovans in the mountains of Asia. Island populations scattered across the Pacific. Each group going about their lives, raising children, passing down knowledge, surviving as they'd always survived. And then, gradually, the world began to empty. It didn't happen everywhere at once. There was no single extinction event. No meteor strike or volcanic winter that wiped out all the other humans in one terrible moment. Just pressure. Building slowly. Squeezing tighter. The climate was shifting. Ice ages came in waves, each one lasting thousands of years. Glacier advanced and retreated like breathing. And with each shift, the habitable zones moved. Forests turned to grassland. Grassland turned to tundra. Rivers dried up or changed course. The animals humans depended on migrated or died. If you were a small population, perfectly adapted to one specific territory, climate change was existential. You couldn't just move. Moving meant entering lands you didn't know. Competing with groups already established there. Learning new plants, new prey, new patterns of weather. And if your population was already small, you were vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with intelligence or capability. Small populations face a trap. A mathematical trap. You need a certain number of individuals to maintain genetic diversity, to survive diseases, to recover from bad years when food is scarce and children die. If your group drops below that number, below that critical threshold, recovery becomes almost impossible. Inbreeding weakens each generation. Random accidents, a harsh winter, a failed hunt, have outsized effects. One bad decade and you might lose a quarter of your population. 2 bad decades and you're gone. This is what happened, we think, to the Neanderthals. Their populations were already fragmented. Isolated groups separated by mountain ranges and ice sheets. Each group numbering maybe a few hundred individuals. Maybe less. And as Homo Sapiens expanded into their territories, the pressure increased. Not necessarily through violence. Just through presence. Both species needed the same things. The best hunting grounds. The caves that faced south and stayed warm in winter. The river valleys with reliable water. And there was only so much to go around. When resources are limited, the species that uses them more efficiently has an advantage. Even a small advantage. 1% better at extracting calories from the environment. 1% better at surviving winters. That's enough. Over generations, the math is brutal. The population with the advantage grows slowly. The other shrinks slowly. And eventually, one disappears. The last Neanderthals lived in refuges. Places where Homo sapiens hadn't yet reached or hadn't yet settled permanently. Southern Spain. Gibraltar. The tip of Europe where the land meets the sea. They clung to survival there for thousands of years after the rest of their species had vanished. Small groups, dwindling, isolated. And then, around 40,000 years ago, they were gone. Imagine being part of that last generation. You're living in a world that's emptying. You remember when there were more of you, when your people occupied many valleys, many caves. Now there's only your group, only the families you know. You don't know you're the last. You just know that life is harder than the stories your grandparents told. That the old hunting grounds are occupied by strangers now. That the winters feel longer and the food feels scarcer. You raise your children. You pass down what you know. You hope they'll survive. But in the back of your mind, there's a quiet fear. What if they don't? What if this winter is the one that breaks you? And one day, it is. Not with drama, just with silence. This happened to all of them. To the Denisovans in their mountain caves. To the small humans on islands who'd survived in isolation for tens of thousands of years. To species we haven't even found yet, who left no bones, no tools, no trace. Each extinction was quiet. Local. A group that failed to produce enough children one generation. A population that couldn't recover from disease or disaster. A final camp that was never reoccupied. And with each loss, something irreplaceable vanished. Not just bodies. Not just genes. But knowledge. Languages. Ways of seeing the world. Stories told around fires. Songs sung to children. Techniques for making tools or finding water or reading weather patterns. All of it locked inside minds that stopped thinking. We'll never know what the Neanderthals talked about in their caves. What their children laughed at. What frightened them. What they believed happened after death. Their culture died with them, leaving only scattered artifacts we struggle to interpret. This is the tragedy of extinction. It's not just the loss of a species. It's the loss of everything that species knew and felt and created. Entire worlds of experience, erased. And it happened in silence because there was no one left to remember. No one to mourn. Just empty caves and cold hearths and tools left abandoned, waiting for archaeologists who wouldn't arrive for 40,000 years. But extinction isn't always total. Sometimes, it's partial. A blending rather than an ending. Because we carry them with us. Neanderthal genes. Denisovan genes. Fragments of their genomes still functioning inside ours. Not much. A few percent. But enough to prove that before they disappeared, we came together. We didn't just replace them. We absorbed them. Some of their children became our children. Some of their DNA became our DNA. And in that sense, they didn't entirely die. They transformed. Became part of something new. Is that survival? Or is it just another kind of extinction? The question doesn't have an easy answer. Because they're gone, truly gone, as distinct peoples. Their languages are silent. Their cultures are lost. The things that made them uniquely themselves have vanished. But pieces of them persist. In our blood. In our genes. In the shape of our skulls and the way our immune systems respond to disease. They're gone and not gone. Present and absent at the same time. And maybe that's the strangest part of this story. The other humans didn't leave the world entirely. They left it partway. Enough to haunt the genetic record. Enough to make us wonder what we lost when they disappeared. But to understand how much of them remains, we need to look deeper. Into the strands of DNA that connect us to people who died 50,000 years ago. Into the molecular evidence that tells a story our ancestors couldn't have known they were writing. Because your body remembers. And it has a confession to make. Inside every cell of your body, coiled and compressed into a space smaller than you can see, is a library. 3 billion letters long. Written in a chemical alphabet that's been copying itself, with minor edits, for billions of years. This is your genome, your instruction manual, the blueprint that built you from a single cell into the person you are now. Most of it came from your parents, half from your mother, half from your father, and theirs came from their parents. An unbroken chain reaching back through generations, through centuries, through millennia. But some of it came from farther away. From people who weren't quite your species. From humans who lived and died before your ancestors learned to farm or build cities or write their names. Your DNA has a confession to make. And for a long time, we didn't know how to hear it. The breakthrough came in 2010. A team of scientists had been working for years to sequence the Neanderthal genome. Extracting DNA from ancient bones is extraordinarily difficult. The DNA degrades over time, breaking into smaller and smaller fragments. Contamination is everywhere. Bacteria, fungi, the DNA of every person who's ever touched the bone. But they developed techniques to filter out the contamination, to piece together the fragments like a jigsaw puzzle with most of the pieces missing. And eventually, they had enough. A Neanderthal genome. Readable. Comparable. They started comparing it to modern human genomes. Looking for differences. Markers that would show how Neanderthals and Homo Sapiens diverged from our common ancestor. And they found something unexpected. Modern humans, people alive today, carry Neanderthal DNA. Not people in Africa, interestingly, but everyone whose ancestors left Africa. Europeans, Asians, Native Americans, Australians. All of them have small percentages of Neanderthal genes woven into their genomes. 1 to 2%. Not much, but undeniable. There was only one way that could have happened. Interbreeding. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals had children together. Hybrid children. And those children survived and had children of their own. And somewhere in that mixing, Neanderthal genes entered the Homo sapiens population and never left. This wasn't a few isolated cases. The genetic evidence suggests multiple encounters. Different times. Different places. Enough mixing that Neanderthal DNA spread throughout the entire non-African Homo sapiens population. Which means when our ancestors met Neanderthals, at least sometimes, they didn't fight. They connected. They formed relationships. They built families. It's hard to know what those relationships looked like. Were they partnerships? Love? Alliances between groups? Or something more complicated, more coerced? We can't know. The DNA can't tell us about consent or emotion or whether those unions were chosen or forced. But we know children were born. And we know those children were valued enough to survive. Raised by one community or the other or both. Integrated into the human story so completely that their genes are still here, 50,000 years later. The same pattern showed up with Denisovans. People in Papua New Guinea, in Australia, across island Southeast Asia, carry Denisovan DNA. 5% in some populations. Even more than we carry from Neanderthals. And again, the only explanation is interbreeding. Homo sapiens and Denisovans meeting in the forests and mountains of Asia. Having children together. Creating lineages that blended two species into one. Scientists call these fragments ghost DNA. Sequences from extinct species haunting modern genomes. Messages from people who can't speak anymore, encoded in molecules we're only now learning to read. And those messages aren't random. Natural selection has shaped what survived. Most Neanderthal DNA is neutral. Junk, essentially. Sequences that don't do much of anything. They're still here because they weren't harmful enough to be eliminated. But some Neanderthal genes are useful. Actively beneficial. And those genes are more common. There's a cluster of Neanderthal genes involved in immune response. fighting off viruses and bacteria. When Homo sapiens entered Europe and Asia, we encountered diseases we'd never faced before. Diseases the Neanderthals had been dealing with for hundreds of thousands of years. They'd evolved resistance. When we mixed with them, we inherited that resistance. A shortcut to immunity that would have taken us thousands of years to evolve on our own. It might have saved countless lives. Might have been the difference between our populations thriving or collapsing. Other Neanderthal genes affect skin and hair. Adaptations to cold. Probably. Thicker skin. Hair that retains heat more efficiently. Useful traits in Ice Age Europe. Denisovan genes contributed too. That high-altitude adaptation in Tibetans came from Denisovans. The ability to live comfortably at elevations where oxygen is scarce. A gift from a species that no longer exists. This changes the story we told ourselves. For a long time, we thought Homo sapiens replaced the other humans. Outcompeted them. Survived where they didn't. And that's true, in a sense. But it's not the whole truth. We didn't just replace them. We merged with them. Took pieces of them into ourselves. They live on in us, in small ways, in the code that builds our bodies and fights our diseases. It's not the survival they might have wanted. Their cultures are gone. Their languages are silent. Their ways of life have vanished. But biologically, genetically, they didn't entirely disappear. They just became part of something larger. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If we carry their DNA, if they're part of us now, did we really erase them from history? Or did we absorb them? Assimilate them into ourselves until the distinction between us and them became meaningless? The answer depends on what you value. Identity, culture, genetics, all of the above. But here's what we know for certain. If your ancestors came from Europe, Asia, the Americas, Australia, anywhere outside of Africa, you carry Neanderthal genes. Probably Denisovan genes too. They're in you right now. Functioning. Active. Part of what makes you who you are. You might have Neanderthal genes that help you fight the flu. Or Denisovan genes that help you breathe at high altitudes. Or immune responses inherited from humans whose names we'll never know, whose faces we'll never see. They're not alive. But they're not entirely dead either. They exist in a strange space between extinction and survival. Gone but present. Lost but found. And the strangest part. We're still discovering them. Still finding new fragments of ghost DNA. New species we mixed with. More chapters in a story we thought we'd already finished. But there's one more question we haven't answered. One piece of the story that's darker and harder to face. Because while some of the other humans merged with us, most of them didn't. Most of them simply vanished. No genetic trace. No descendants. No legacy except bones in the ground. They were erased. Completely. Finally. And we need to understand how. There's a painting from 1873. It shows a Neanderthal family huddled in a cave. The artist painted them as monsters. Hunched and brutish. Ape-like faces twisted with rage or stupidity. Covered in matted hair. Clutching crude clubs. Everything about the image screams primitive. Less than human. Deserving of extinction. This painting hung in museums. It appeared in textbooks. For generations. This is what people saw when they thought about Neanderthals. This is what they believed. And it was a lie. Not a deliberate one, perhaps. The artist was working with the science of his time. With assumptions that seemed reasonable then but crumble under scrutiny now. But intention doesn't matter. The damage was done. We erased them from history once when they died. And then we erased them again by turning them into monsters. By stripping away their humanity even in memory. This is the final erasure. And it might be the cruelest one. When the first Neanderthal bones were discovered in the mid-1800s, scientists didn't know what to make of them. The skull was large but oddly shaped. Heavy brow ridges. No chin. Proportions that didn't match modern humans. Some suggested they were deformed. Diseased individuals from recent history. Others recognized them as ancient but assumed they were primitive ancestors. Evolutionary dead ends. Failures that went extinct because they couldn't compete with superior modern humans. The language used to describe them reflected this bias. Savage. Brutish. Subhuman. Cave dwellers, said with contempt, as if living in caves made you less intelligent rather than practical. As if seeking shelter from Ice Age winters was a sign of stupidity rather than wisdom. Early reconstructions showed them stooped and bent, unable to walk fully upright. Knuckles dragging. More ape than human. This image was based on a single arthritic skeleton. One individual who'd suffered from severe disease was used to represent the entire species. Imagine if future archaeologists found the skeleton of someone with advanced osteoporosis and concluded all humans walked hunched over. The scientific community, for the most part, accepted this narrative. It was comfortable. It made us feel good about ourselves. We were the pinnacle of evolution, the success story, and they were the cautionary tale, the branch that failed. But science, real science, doesn't stay comfortable. It questions. It tests. It corrects. By the mid-20th century, new discoveries were forcing a reassessment. More complete Neanderthal skeletons showed they walked upright, just like us. Their posture was fully human. That early reconstruction was wrong. Their brain size was as large as ours, sometimes larger. You couldn't dismiss them as stupid anymore. The evidence wouldn't allow it. And the archaeological record kept revealing more. Sophisticated tools. Controlled use of fire. Burial of the dead. Care for the injured. All behaviors that suggested complex thought, culture, emotional depth. Slowly, the image began to change. Reconstructions became more accurate, more human. Artists started painting them with dignity, standing upright, using tools skillfully, looking thoughtful rather than savage. Modern forensic techniques allowed scientists to rebuild Neanderthal faces from skulls. And what emerged were faces you might pass on the street without noticing. Different. Yes. But not monstrous. Not inhuman. Just different. They had the same range of expressions we do. Joy. Sorrow. Curiosity. Fear. You can see it in the bones if you know how to look. The muscle attachments that create a smile. The eye sockets that held eyes capable of tears. They felt pain. We know this because they survived injuries that must have been agonizing. Broken bones that healed. Infections that resolved. They endured because they wanted to live, just like we do. They loved their children. We know this because children with disabilities survived to adulthood. Children who couldn't have cared for themselves. Someone fed them, protected them, valued them enough to keep them alive when survival was hard enough for healthy individuals. They mourned their dead. We know this because they buried them carefully. Sometimes with objects. Sometimes with evidence of ritual we can't fully interpret but can recognize as meaningful. They had culture. Different Neanderthal groups made tools in different styles. Styles that persisted across generations in specific regions. Traditions. Teaching. Knowledge passed from elder to child. They spoke. We don't know what their language sounded like. But their anatomy suggests they were capable of complex speech. And coordinating hunts, passing down tool-making techniques, caring for communities all require communication beyond simple gestures. They were people. Fully. Completely. Undeniably. But by the time science corrected the record, the damage to their memory was done. The old images persisted in popular culture. The word Neanderthal became an insult, a synonym for stupid, backward, ugly. Even today, people use it that way, unaware that actual Neanderthals were none of those things. That calling someone a Neanderthal as an insult is, ironically, an insult to Neanderthals. This matters more than you might think, because how we remember the dead says something about how we value life, about what we consider human and what we don't. When we turned Neanderthals into monsters, we made their extinction seem inevitable, natural, maybe even good. We removed any moral weight from their disappearance. They were primitive, we told ourselves. They couldn't adapt. They were supposed to die out. But that's not what happened. They were adapted, perfectly adapted to their world. They survived for hundreds of thousands of years, longer than we've existed as a species. They didn't fail. They were unlucky. They faced pressures they couldn't overcome. Climate shifts, competition from us, small populations vulnerable to random chance. And they lost. Not because they were inferior, but because survival is never guaranteed, no matter how capable you are. And when we remember them as monsters, we lose something important. We lose the ability to feel the weight of what was lost, the tragedy of it. Because imagine being Neanderthal. Imagine your life. You wake in a cave as dawn breaks. Your family sleeps around you. Your child nestled against your side, warm and safe. You tend the fire. Prepare for the hunt. You know this valley intimately. Every stream, every trail. Your grandfather taught you where to find the best stone for tools. Your mother taught you which plants are safe to eat. You have language, stories, names for the people you love, jokes that make your children laugh, songs you sing when the work is hard. You are human. In every way that matters, you are human. And then, over generations you can't perceive, your world begins to change. Strangers appear, different but similar, competing for the same resources. Your population shrinks, slowly at first, then faster, and eventually, there's no one left to remember your songs. No one left to teach your children. No one left to say your names. That's the first erasure. The physical one. The extinction. But the second erasure, the one we inflicted, might be worse. Because we took away your dignity. We turned you into monsters in the stories we told. We made your existence a joke. A cautionary tale. A synonym for stupidity. We erased you twice. Once from the world. Once from memory. And only now, after thousands of years, are we beginning to give you back your humanity. To see you as you were. To honor what you were. But here's what haunts me. If we could do this to the Neanderthals, who else have we erased? What other humans lived and died and disappeared before we even knew to look for them? Because the Neanderthals, at least, we found. We studied. We corrected our mistakes about. But what about the ones we haven't found yet? The ones who left no bones, no tools, no trace. How many human species are lost to us forever? And how will we remember them, if we ever find them at all? We've traveled a long way together. Through ice and fire. Across continents and millennia. We've met humans who aren't here anymore. Neanderthals in their caves. Denisovans in the mountains. Small islanders. Ghost species we've only just discovered. We've walked through their world and tried to understand why it's ours now, and not theirs. This is where the journey ends. Not with answers tied in neat bows, but with understanding. With perspective. With the quiet weight of what we've learned. Here's the truth we need to carry forward. Humans were never one species. Never one story. For most of our history, Humanity was plural. Multiple experiments in being human, running simultaneously across the world. Different bodies, different adaptations, different solutions to the problem of survival. And for a very long time, that diversity worked. Each human species thrived in its own territory. Neanderthals ruled Ice Age Europe for 250,000 years. Denisovans spread across Asia for just as long. Island populations persisted in isolation. All of them successful, all of them human. But survival is never permanent. No matter how well adapted you are, no matter how long you've endured, the world changes. And sometimes, you can't change with it. So why did they vanish? Why are we the only ones left? There's no single answer. No smoking gun. No one moment where everything turned. Just layers of pressure, building over thousands of years. Climate played a role. The ice ages weren't stable. They pulsed. Glacier advanced and retreated. Temperatures swung wildly. Forests became tundra. Rivers dried up. The animals humans depended on migrated or went extinct. And each climate shift was a test. Adapt or die. Small populations played a role. When your entire species numbers in the thousands, maybe less, you're vulnerable in ways large populations aren't. One bad decade. One disease. One stretch of harsh winters. And your numbers drop below the point where recovery is possible. Genetic diversity collapses. Inbreeding weakens each generation. And eventually, there aren't enough of you left. Competition played a role. When Homo Sapiens expanded into territories occupied by other humans, we didn't need to fight wars to have an impact. We just needed to be there, using the same hunting grounds, sheltering in the same caves, taking resources that were already scarce. Even a small advantage in efficiency, in cooperation, in adaptability, compounds over generations. One population grows, the other shrinks. The math is brutal. And luck played a role. Random chance. Being in the wrong place when disaster struck. A volcanic eruption. A particularly harsh ice age. A disease that happened to hit your population harder. Survival is never just about being better. Sometimes it's about being lucky. Homo sapiens had advantages. We cooperated in larger groups. We built wider trade networks. We adapted our behavior quickly without waiting for our bodies to evolve. We innovated constantly, and innovation spread through our populations faster than through smaller, more isolated groups. But we weren't smarter, necessarily. Neanderthals had brains as large as ours. We weren't stronger. They were far stronger. We weren't better adapted to cold or altitude or island life. They were. What we had was flexibility, numbers, connection, and timing. We expanded at exactly the moment when climate instability was putting maximum pressure on everyone. And we survived that pressure slightly better than they did. Just slightly. That's all it took. If the climate had been different, if the timing had shifted by a few thousand years, the outcome might have been different too. Maybe Neanderthals would still be here. Maybe we'd be the ones who vanished. Or maybe both of us would have survived, and the world today would hold two human species instead of one. We'll never know. History only happened one way. But here's what we do know. The other humans didn't completely disappear. Not entirely. Because we carry pieces of them inside us. If your ancestors came from outside Africa, you have Neanderthal DNA. 1 to 2% of your genome. Fragments that help fight disease. That influence your skin and hair. That connect you, directly, to people who lived 50,000 years ago. You might have Denisovan DNA too. Genes that help you breathe at high altitude. That adapted you to environments your own ancestors never evolved in. Gifts from a species that no longer walks the earth. We're not purely Homo sapiens. We're a mosaic, a blending of lineages. The last surviving branch of the human family tree, yes, but carrying genetic memories of branches that fell. In that sense, they're not entirely gone. They live on in us. Small pieces. Echoes. Not the survival they would have wanted. Their cultures are lost. Their languages are silent. Their ways of seeing the world have vanished. But biologically, they persist. And that complicates the story. Makes it less clean. Less simple. We didn't just erase them. We absorbed them. Became something that's neither purely them nor purely us. Something new. And maybe that's the most human thing of all. We've never been pure. We've always been mixed. Hybrid. Changed by everyone we've encountered. What does this story teach us? What should we take from it? First, humility. We survived not because we were destined to. Not because we were superior in some cosmic sense. But because of circumstances we barely controlled. Luck and timing and the accidents of history. We could have been the ones who vanished. Easily. Second, fragility. Survival is never guaranteed. Not for individuals. Not for populations. Not for species. The Neanderthals endured for hundreds of thousands of years and still went extinct. Success in the past doesn't protect you from changes in the future. Third, loss. Every extinction erases something irreplaceable. Ways of being. Ways of knowing. The Neanderthals saw the world differently than we do. Understood things we'll never understand. And when they died, that knowledge died with them. We can reconstruct their bones. We can read their DNA. But we can't recover their thoughts. Their stories. Their voices. Those voices are lost. And we should feel the weight of that loss. Not because we're responsible, necessarily. Not because we could have prevented it. But because acknowledging what's gone is how we honor it. And finally, perspective. Deep time. The realization that we're just one moment in a much longer story. Humans, all kinds of humans, have existed for millions of years. We've only been the sole human species for a tiny fraction of that time. 40,000 years. Maybe less. In the grand scale of history, we just got here. And we have no guarantee we'll last as long as the Neanderthals did. As long as Homo erectus did. We're the current chapter, not the final one. The past is not distant and separate. It's beneath our feet. In the caves we can still visit. In the tools we can still hold. In the bones we can still examine. And it's inside us. In our genes. In our bodies. In the immunity we inherited from people who died before we learned to write. We walk on a world that remembers. That holds layers of history we're only beginning to read. And we carry within us the genetic legacy of humans we'll never meet. That's both humbling and beautiful. We're connected to deep time in ways we're only just discovering. We're part of a story much bigger and stranger than we imagined. And the ending of that story isn't written yet. Because we're still here. Still changing. Still adapting. Still facing pressures that might shape us into something new. Or might erase us the way our cousins were erased. We don't know how this ends. We can't. We can only do what every human species has always done. Survive as best we can. Pass down what we know. Hope that our children's children will remember us kindly. And maybe, sometimes, look back at the humans who came before. The ones who tried and failed. The ones who lived and loved and fought to survive in a world that wanted them dead. They were people. Like us. Different. But not so different. They felt fear and joy and hope. They raised children and told stories and looked up at the same stars we see. And then they were gone. Quietly. Without fanfare. Leaving only whispers in our DNA and bones in the earth. We weren't the first humans. We're not even the best humans, if such a thing can be measured. We're just the ones who happened to survive. The last branch still growing on a tree that once held many. We weren't the first humans. We're the last ones left. If you'd like to drift again some night, another journey will be waiting for you. Good night.